Monsters is a show about the worst human beings on the planet. Viewer discretion is advised. Alison Botha was having a normal day with her friends when a chance encounter turned her life upside down. All it took was parking in a dimly lit area to attract a person who claimed to be possessed by a demon. This is Monsters. The satanic panic is a type of moral panic that started becoming more prominent in the United States in the early 1970s. The acts of the Manson family, along with the publishing of the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey in 1969, brought rise to many self-proclaimed Satanists claiming occult conspiracies were everywhere. Then, a series of highly publicized serial killers in the 1970s increased the public's fear of Satanists. It only increased in the 1980s with stranger danger and the idea that even your own next-door neighbor could be an evil Satan worshiper just dying for the chance to kidnap your child and sacrifice them to the devil. A conspiracy that children were being taken to be used by satanic sex abuse cults, and of course, rock music was helping fuel this fire. In 1992, the Department of Justice had debunked the claims of ritual child sex cults, and the satanic panic in the United States had died by 1995. The idea had spread to other countries by then, and in South Africa, they created the Occult-Related Crimes Unit in 1992. Alison Botha's parents divorced when she was 10 years old, and she grew up living with her mother, Claire, and her brother, Neil, in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. She was the head girl at the Collegiate High School for Girls before graduating and taking a job as an insurance broker. On December 17, 1994, 27-year-old Alison had spent the day at the beach with friends. For everyone in the Northern Hemisphere, remember that December in the Southern Hemisphere is the beginning of summer. Afterward, they went back to Alison's apartment, ate pizza, and played games. Alison was tall and attractive with long brunette hair. At about 1 o'clock the following morning, Alison gave one of her friends a ride home and was looking forward to getting some sleep when she arrived back at her apartment. Once back home, the parking spot she had left had been taken, so she drove around and found another spot right underneath a big tree. She parked her car on the dimly lit street, and as she was reaching over to grab some clothes to take inside with her, the driver's door swung open. A young man with blonde hair pointed a knife at her and said, quote, "Move over or I'll kill you," end quote. So she did. He got into the driver's seat and sped away. 26-year-old Frans du Toit and 19-year-old Theuns Kruger were no strangers to violent crime. In February of 1994, du Toit surprised a 19-year-old student who was sitting in her car. He had a gun and told her to move over before sitting in the driver's seat. He drove to a secluded area and raped the woman. When he was done, he drove them to a cafe where he bought her food and a rose. Then he drove to another location where he raped her again. He drove them back to the city and left her alive. She reported the rape a week later, and du Toit was arrested in March but was released on bail. On December 4, 1994, du Toit and Kruger approached a 21-year-old woman who was 3 months pregnant. They threatened her with a gun and forced her to walk to a secluded area in the city where both men raped her. They originally threatened to kill her, but decided to let her go. She immediately reported the incident, and they were both arrested that day. They were released on their own recognizance and ordered to return to court on January 5th. The prosecutor claimed that he wasn't aware that du Toit had another rape charge pending, but there was major backlash that they were even released on their own recognizance in a rape case. Others have claimed that authorities in South Africa did not take rape charges seriously, at least not back then. It was only 2 weeks later that du Toit carjacked Alison and drove off. He told her his name was Clinton and that he just needed to use her car for an hour. He promised that he wasn't going to hurt her. He said that someone owed him money and that he wouldn't take long. He eventually picked up another man, Kruger, and they drove to a secluded area of town. Both men raped Alison before du Toit strangled her until she passed out. They dragged her unconscious body from the car to the bushes on the side of the coastal road. Du Toit began stabbing Alison in the abdomen in the hope of, quote, ruining her female organs, end quote. He stabbed her about 35 times, which was enough to make her intestines fall out of her body. When Kruger saw the woman's leg twitch, he grabbed the knife and started slashing her throat. Doctors said that Alison's throat was slashed no less than 17 times. Unbeknownst to the pair of violent rapists, what Kruger had just done had ultimately saved their victim's life. When Du Toit strangled her, he crushed her windpipe and she was no longer getting air. But when Kruger slashed her throat, he cut open her airway and she was able to breathe again. Believing that they had killed her, they left. These were two people who obviously had an extreme hatred of women. They had a history of violence towards women already, and now, while attempting to kill a woman, one of them targeted her abdomen in order to ruin her female organs. When they left Alison on the side of the road, they believed she was dead, so Du Toit wasn't trying to make her suffer by not being able to have children in the future. He simply hated the part of her that made her a woman. Alison regained consciousness and wrote the names the two men had used in the sand, so if she died, the police would have something to use to track down her killers. She saw headlights in the nearby road, but when she tried to move, she realized that her organs had fallen out of her body. One of her attackers left a shirt behind, and she was able to tie it around her stomach to help hold herself together. The next problem that she faced was the fact that a muscle in her neck had been damaged in the attack, and it made her unable to hold her head upright. She could reach up and hold her head straight, but if she let go, her head would involuntarily flop backwards. So, with one hand cradling her exposed intestines, and the other holding her head straight, Alison slowly crawled through the brush to the street and laid across the white lines. When Tian Eilert and his friends found Alison collapsed on the road, they were amazed that she was still alive. Fortunately, one of them had a cell phone because they knew they needed to get an ambulance there as fast as possible. Tian knew that he couldn't let the woman fall asleep, so he continued to talk to her, telling her calmly to breathe. After an hour and 45 minutes, an ambulance finally arrived to take Alison to the hospital and receive life-saving surgery. At Port Elizabeth Provincial Hospital, Alison was rushed to surgery. The doctor described her condition as she entered the hospital. Quote, "She was filthy, black as a coal miner. Her entire body was covered in a fine layer of black sand. Her eyes had hemorrhaged and were blood red. Her hair was matted with sand, twigs, leaves, and dried blood. Her knees were cut and scraped, her feet were lacerated, and her fingernails were black." End quote. Her intestines were washed in a saline solution before having any punctures stitched and placing them back inside her body. She had the wounds to her neck repaired, where luckily her carotid arteries and voice box had been missed. After months in the hospital, Alison would go on to make a full recovery, though many were unsure if she would ever be able to have children. While still in the hospital, Alison picked Du Toit and Kruger out of a police binder full of mugshots. They were both arrested at 5 o'clock in the morning on December 19th. Kruger was interviewed first, and when he was told he was being charged with rape and attempted murder, he was shocked. At the time, they believed that they had killed Alison Botha, but Detective Humpel let him know that she had survived. Kruger gave the detective the knife he used to slice Alison's throat and the jewelry that he had taken off Alison's body. He then made a full confession to the attack and rape of the pregnant woman on December 4th. Du Toit also confessed to the rape and attempted murder of Alison. Detective Humpel said that he showed no remorse and even explained that they were going to find another girl the next day who they would have raped and then thrown off a bridge. The media went wild over the story, but especially when Du Toit claimed that his actions were the result of his involvement with Satanism. He claimed that he had been possessed by a demon and it was the demon who wanted to rape and murder women. He claimed that he had since undergone an exorcism. Both Frans du Toit and Theuns Kruger were found guilty on all charges. 2 counts of abduction, 2 counts of indecent assault, 2 counts of rape, 1 count of attempted murder, and 1 count of robbery with aggravating circumstances. They were charges from both the attacks on Alison and the pregnant woman. Frans du Toit was given 3 life sentences, and Theuns Kruger was given 1 life sentence plus 25 years. The judge personally asked that a note be placed in both of their files so that authorities knew that the judge wanted them to remain in prison for the rest of their lives, which is exactly where they should be. Except, in 2012, new legislation was passed that would grant parole to prisoners who were sentenced before 2004 and had already served 13 years and 4 months of their sentence. When their parole was reviewed in 2015, Alison Botha made a statement and many people signed a petition to keep them locked up. Fortunately, there's no information online claiming that they were granted parole, and the most recent news articles that I could find on the pair were 5 years old. They seem to be still in prison, and it seems likely that they will remain there. For Alison, she suffered from a great deal of depression after the attack. She struggled with what to do with her life that had been so shattered by the 2 evil men. She ultimately chose to face the issue head-on, so she left her career in insurance and began giving motivational speeches around the world.
I have always believed that as much as it happened to me, because there were so many lessons in it, it's not actually my right to keep it to myself, because those lessons are ones that people can all learn from. And I hope as I share with you today, as much as I'm not speaking so much about gender-based violence, my crime was obviously a gender-based violence, but I want you also to try and think about your own stuff. We've all got stuff. We are all different. You guys who are younger will have different problems from what your parents and your teachers have. Some of you might have suffered major traumas, and I acknowledge that, and I'm sorry if that is your story. But some of you might just be having a so-called ordinary life, but you will have stuff that you fight against, stuff that you didn't choose, obstacles, problems that come your way, even if it's just exams. And I hope as I share with you my story that was not of my choosing, that you'll find something that you can liken it to in your own lives that's not of your choosing. And maybe some of the things that helped me overcome what happened to me, that made me look at what happened to me as actually a positive thing, might be something that you can take as well and look at your own stuff and say, actually, I'll be okay. That's what I hope for today.
She has been to more than 30 countries, sharing her method of dealing with trauma to countless people, including some survivors of the attacks on September 11th.
And I turned around, there was a man standing there, white men, there's 2 white men involved in my case. White man standing there with a knife in his hand. He put the knife in my throat and he said to me, "Move over or I'll kill you." You know, in that freeze-frame moment, this is the kind of thing that happens in movies, you know. It's not supposed to be you really experiencing this experience. And a lot of people will say to me afterwards, and I've even said it to myself, you know, "Oh, I would react this way," or "I don't know how I would react." Some people are very definite that they would have like ankle-chopped him or screamed or whatever. You don't know. You can prepare yourself as best you can by going for self-defense courses, which I advocate very much, by the way. Because what if, you know? But you actually don't know how you're going to react. And I wish I could have known and been prepared, but of course I was also someone this is never going to happen to, so I didn't pre-thought it at all. I did exactly as he asked me. Without really thinking in those first few moments, I moved to the passenger seat. He got in the car and was actually driving the car before I actually came to my senses of where I found myself. As I say, he was already driving the car. Now, when I did come to my senses, one of the first thoughts I had, which I probably is a thought that many people have said to me, certainly people say when they read my book and they get to this part, and they know, of course, from reading the back what's going to come, they're thinking, "Come out." And I did think of it. I even had my hand on the door handle, and I thought, okay, just get ready. When you open this door, you're going to have to be brave enough to roll out. When you see it in movies, it's one thing, okay? Those are stunt people rolling out of moving cars. When you're in the moving car yourself.
In 1995, she received Femina magazine's Woman of Courage Award and was announced Port Elizabeth's Citizen of the Year. In 1997, she got married, and after nearly 2 decades of wondering if she would ever be able to have children, in 2003, she gave birth to her first child, a son. Her second son was born in 2006. You can read more about this story in the book I Have Life, Alison's Journey by Marianne Tham. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment, and make sure to hit the subscribe button to ensure you don't miss a video. Also, remember that if you'd like to support the show, You can find information on how to do that in the video's info or at thisismonsters.com/support. Thanks again.